Yeah, David. Let's talk about some of your funds. I know everybody in this chat probably loves the income versions. I'm going to see if I can throw on. I've got. Let me get the other one. That's IS. Let's see. Oh, there it is. So you got these two funds out here that talk about cover calls. You of course you got ISBG, which has the gold and Bitcoin. Could you run through those for us just to help us out because you know more than both Brad and I. Brad knows more than I do, and of course you're the creator, so I believe you've got probably the most knowledge. Let's talk.
You guys are very knowledgeable, so I wouldn't say anything other than that. But no, thank you for having me on. So you guys pretty much outlined what the overall picture of what we're trying to do here is. Like rule number one, offer $2 exposure for $1 invested, so you get two different asset classes simultaneously. And then number two, the most important thing for us is keeping that exposure. So we rebalance the portfolio twice a day to keep that 100% exposure on both asset classes. And then it gets very creative from there, right? How we actually generate premium is done very opportunistically, right? Like there's a lot of people who said, oh, when the markets are down, volatility was high, we didn't harvest a lot of premium then. Now we're harvesting more because it's less volatile. We need to hit our income targets. The exact opposite is true. Like, where do you think there's more alpha? When volatility is very high at the bottom. But in order to be able to capture that alpha, you need a very active option strategy so that you can be responsive and also keep your exposure and your delta at that 100% target. And so actually right now we're harvesting the least amount of premium we've harvested in a long time because it's just not that attractive. So our ETF is harvesting some premium, but it's a little bit more just directional with the underlying because we feel like there'll be better opportunities in the future. But I think really that's what differentiates what we're doing from what I see a lot of other people doing is we fix our exposure and we have a very opportunistic palette for how we generate premium versus whether you're boosted or not, you are still floating. Your leverage is still floating. Like everything is just a little bit of leverage. Like even, everyone seems very enamored right now with like put spreads. Put spreads is just, a positive beta and a little bit of leverage.
Yeah, that is so true, David. So true. It is leverage to the upside and leverage to the downside because if it goes down, you're going to get more exposure to the downside.
Yeah, and I think the vehicle you guys are talking about, I think, is a phenomenal fund. It probably has like a beta to the underlying of like 1.1, so it's like a slightly leveraged vehicle, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So David, where did you get the idea of using just Bitcoin and gold together instead of maybe like doing someone like I mean, you got all these other funds out there. You got like the Neos investments. They track basically the indexes. You have the Tap Alpha that's doing the zero DTE, but you guys are doing a little bit something different. I mean, Curve's got their gold fund. Neos has got their gold fund, but you're combining not only gold, but you're combining Bitcoin as well. How did that idea just come about?
Yeah. So first I'll talk about like stacking in general is a concept that's very much taking storm in the institutional world and also in the RIA space. It's one of the faster growing categories in the ETF world and also in the hedge fund world, right? So if you just think about it from a hedge fund perspective, hedge funds can add some alpha, but oftentimes they end up performing the S&P. Instead of competing with the S&P, they stack it on top. This is actually not a new concept. PIMCO has been doing this since the 90s. If anyone remembers the PIMCO Stock Plus Mutual Fund, it's very simply their active bond strategy stacked on top of the S&P 500. So it's a way to introduce a little bit of leverage in your portfolio, but do it with less path dependency. Even if you have 130, 150% leverage, same asset, you're going to have more path dependency because you're going to have positive correlation from your base and the assets you're leveraging as well. So that diversification is really helpful. Diversification is the closest thing we have to a free lunch in this market. And that doesn't just mean own independent assets. That means actively doing the rebalancing between them. And, why Bitcoin and gold? Honestly, I've always been in a hunt for scarcity assets. And I think there's the two premier scarcity assets. So Brad was kidding earlier, but our next launch of this lineup will be ISSG, which is our stocks and gold. We haven't announced when yet, but that's the concept. Is like
Yeah.
you can hold the scarcity assets together, or you can hold individually, either one of them stacked on top of the stock market. Actually, ISSB is the one that's really been rocking out. That's already, I mean, we launched January 20th. The market obviously tanked. We have this 200% exposure ETF, and we are green. Where our total return is positive since our launch date, which is pretty phenomenal. So.
Yeah. I was just about to talk about ISSB because I mean, many people in our chat, I don't know how many of them are fully into Bitcoin, but a lot of them talk about gold, a lot of them talk about BTCI, but a lot of them have, I mean, option ETFs with stocks, and so ISSB is I mean, gives you a little bit of stocks, gives you Bitcoin, gives you a little bit of both, and with gold, I mean, oh man, you're just making our mouths water right here, David.
Scarcity. I mean, I wish it wasn't the case, but we live in a world where the government is just in a perpetual debt spiral, and finding assets that store value, you have to do two things in your portfolio. You have to find, businesses and free cash flow that will grow on one side, and then I think the alternative is these scarcity assets. The conversation that's being that the institutional world is having right now is, how do we change this benchmark that is the 60/40? And I know that's going to make Brad smile because I know he's very anti 60/40 benchmark. But it doesn't have to be just Bitcoin and gold. It could just be broad-based commodities, etc. There's got to be a real shift into the off for people's portfolios. Not that I don't think that at times treasury bonds opportunistically have a place in your portfolio or not. Like I will trade them occasionally, especially when the yields get very high in them. But I think Bitcoin and gold have a lot more scarcity profile than something like treasuries will in your portfolio over the last couple of years, and likely in the coming years as well.
Yeah, that's good to hear. When we're talking about income off these funds, how do you generate the income? I mean, I probably I know, but I want you to kind of give that explanation so then everybody else knows, because I think your funds are quite new to a lot of income investors. I mean, I think ISBD's got about, or ISBG's got about like 20 to 30 million assets under management. Is that correct? Or
BTGD has 70 almost. ISBG
yes,
is right about 5 right now.
Okay. Well, could you kind of break down where this income comes from, so then people have a good idea of where you guys are coming from?
First and foremost, and this actually says this on the sheet you first laid, but
I could throw that back on just so then we all can see that too.
You really only generate what you can reasonably expect. You should only distribute what you can reasonably expect to generate over full market cycles. And Brad talked about this a little bit earlier, right? Like, how much might you expect the S&P to return over a full market cycle? How much might you expect Bitcoin to return over a full market cycle? Add the two together, add a couple percentage points for the benefits of diversification, add a couple percentage points for harvesting volatility, maybe 5 to 8 for each asset class on that, maybe a little bit of alpha beyond that. But that's all you can reasonably expect. This is any of these ETFs that are leveraged at all, whether it's us or at 200 or boosted at 1.3 or like a put spread at 1.1, there is some cost to leverage in that, like, for all of us. It's not substantial. You can call it about 1% a quarter right now, which candidly is cheaper than individuals can get on margin. But those are the main 4 sources of where we generate our returns from. And as Brad alluded to, we try to keep, especially when assets are down, Bitcoin is still down, our distribution is very, very low, and we'll keep them around the 18 to 20% range, which, on a 200% exposure basket is actually very, very conservative. The unleveraged yield is very conservative, with the goal of, bumping that up to 21, 22, 23 when markets rebound and we hit all-time highs again in some of these underlying assets.
Oh, that's great, David. That's great to know. Let's see. I got lots of different questions. One big thing a lot of people are looking at is tax efficiency.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've got a lot of people that, they'll pull like these ETFs in the Roth IRA, hoping that they can avoid taxes. But a lot of us put our stuff into taxable accounts, making sure we can grow them fast. But then the tax issue does come up. How does tax efficiency work within your funds?
Yeah, we are as tax efficient as you can be in the ETF wrapper. So most of our beta comes from using flex options, which I know there's a lot of funds that are using flex options. As Brad alluded to earlier, these are positions that can be, the technical term is using in-kind creation redemption, but really it's most easiest to search for if you just look for the heartbeat trade. But that essentially allows us to roll over most of our beta without it generating a taxable event. Some of the premium will have some taxes, some of it will be return of capital, but we're definitely set up to be as tax efficient as possible. We post all our expectations each week. I would like to state though, all ETFs, these are just expectations into the year comes in.
Yeah.
And I'll also say about that, there's thought, skill, and a little bit of luck that comes into every single one of these funds' ability to have that number be as close as possible to all returning capital. Over long cycles, it's not luck, but year by year, it is a little bit luck, and oftentimes the fourth quarter can change that a lot. So I would advise against like bucketing certain companies as tax efficient because of track record from last year versus others. But I would say, I think Brad broke down how to look at ETFs in a very good way. Like, look at the methodology over the results. And I think that's like the one resounding message, especially with the use of AI. I was listening to you guys. I was like, you could just take the prospectus, you could take their deck, pump it into AI, and just start asking it questions. And honestly, like, I look at so many products, I do that too. I don't have time to go through every single page myself. I'm just interested in what someone else is doing.